Yeah, I think your question of bundling some of the demographic changes that we're going through with the change that we're all going to go through as we digitize our business is a really interesting one because there's people who grew up in a world where everything wasn't done easily through your phone tend to want to recreate the same process on a computer that they had before, and what we're finding is that makes it cumbersome and slower vis-a-vis our competition, and so there's been this constant relearning of how we can simplify and take friction out of our business so that it becomes easy and it becomes fast and it works right the first time every time. And that's a really powerful journey to go on, and you don't get it right the first time. So it means a big investment. It means making room for the future in your current business as well. And very often the people who are most enthusiastic about it and about doing that change are some of the people who did grow up in a world where all they knew was computers and cell phones. And so we find ourselves investing more and more in that area of the business. I think this idea of separating the selling process as we know it in terms of technical content, many iterations of pricing, drawings going back and forth, multiple sales calls which are in one person's head, and so they become the subject expert, to a much more collaborative, faster, teamwork type oriented environment where, and I think one of the biggest challenges for our industry is going to be to get pricing right the first iteration, and that because, well, I know it's a massive challenge, and I would put that right up there with one of the top 3 challenges in our industry, because we're built around the complexity of our pricing and the back and forth. So I think you really have to kind of throw your processes away and burn the ships and start over. And of course, when you're running multi-billion-dollar companies, you just don't do that right away. You've got to kind of build the bridge to the future. One of the litmus tests on whether we've got something right is, can our inside people, who I think are the most impacted, our inside salespeople are the most impacted by changes in digital strategy and digital tools, can they use the tool that our customer is using? And until we can say yes, they can actually do everything that they need to do at their desk or in their hand with what we're actually giving to our customers, then we know that we're on the right track. So there's a lot of investment and thought about usability and getting third-party feedback, and you obviously have to get out of your own shop and get out in front of people and be with them in the field as they make these changes. So it's really a revolution that we're all going through.
As I listen, you're right, and we look about this process, and we tend to talk about things as this one-size-fits-all approach, because certainly this traditional outside sales rep, inside support is the sledgehammer we take to every sales problem that we have, and so how do you do some segmentation around your customers, understand that what's the sales channel that's correct for them, is the right processes to flow to that customer, so that you're using the web and digital marketing and marketing automation when it's appropriate to the customer and it's effective, and you're using inside sales, or you got call centers, all these kind of things. We have lots of channels we can use. And we just kind of gotten used to, and that's probably one of the change things in the culture of the organization, is that we do it this way, and it's a promotion to be an outside sales rep, and you can't take the credit away from me, so it's very difficult to. But I will say and just kind of throwing out there that the industry, since we're in the energy business, right? We're all around electricity. The appeal to the younger generation coming in is tremendous. We have lots to talk about how we do better and we make the world better because we're in this industry. Electricity is just fascinating, and the messaging I find to recruiting young talent has just been unbelievable, because they think they're doing something well for the world as well as doing something well for themselves. So we shouldn't shortchange ourselves that it's wholesale distribution, but we're in the electrical industry. We're a little different, and we have a nice message to sell to that group.
I want to chime in on this process content separation, and there's generic business strategies. And that one of the fundamental differences between retail businesses, and we're all kind of moving that way, and distribution, is if you look at really effective retail chains, they create a consistent customer experience that's good. And when Brian was talking about moving the bar up and the hotel business, a big part of that was getting information in the hands of lower level people because they make good decisions when they have those tools. But the key thing, and I'll tell you, this goes back to 1996. We did a study. I'm a research fellow at NAED, and we did a study called that year on facing the forces of change, and it was reforming your business with best practices, right? And they mapped all it out. And by the way, it was a commercial failure because nobody in electrical cared what happened in plastic, and nobody cared what happened in electrical, and everybody had their own little sandbox. But the key thing we found was that mass customization was at the heart of wholesale distribution, and I think that's a fancy word for what Chris was talking about where do you put the bundle around, because in plain language, most people in this room violate their policies, procedures, and practices and do something unique for your big customers. And it's kind of like the porridge and Goldilocks, and you do it just right. And so when manufacturers look at distribution, or private equity guys look at distribution, and they look at us and they think we're chaotic and we couldn't find our butt with both hands in our back pocket, and then they come in and put Six Sigma in and totally destroy the company because you need process, but you must have that flexibility. And I'm not, that's part of the art of how do you put it together. And I think that's part of what the hotel thing was, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from the hotel standpoint, the information, the content is fundamental. And I believe that our customers are expecting our content to be 100%. And in our competition on the web, it is 100%. And so I think about your question in two ways with 3 points. One is on content, it's a never-ending battle. It's an ecosystem, and it's not only product content and customer content, it's also learning content and our own internal measures content. And I think we cannot shortchange that. If a customer, any customer, is talking to our inside salespeople, or they go to our web, or they're talking to anybody in our business, and they get old or bad information, the experience is ruined. From the process side, a lot of good points were already made. The only thing I would add is it's important to take the time to develop a scorecard and a measurement system that not only measures the financial reportings, the things that we normally keep track of, but those activities in our business that are proxies for whether our salespeople, our technical people, anybody in that customer service delivery model, are they getting what they need when they need it, and are they serving their customers well? So sort of a activity scorecard at all of those dimensions, in the ecosystem.
We're not going to sit here and spend a lot of time talking about pricing, because not that I think this industry even had the competence to price fix. Sorry. But I mean, Halsey got me going. But the one thing, and this kind of goes to what Brian said, anytime a private equity company today buys a distributor, if they're buying it, they're buying the future revenue stream, and they have to have a value creation plan. So I'm going to pay X dollars for the company. I'm going to make changes to make the company more valuable. The number one thing, and I don't care who it is, the first thing they put in, if they don't have it, is their version of a strategic pricing system. And everybody's, it's like there's a lot of different approaches, and everybody's got their opinions. It's like my Chevy's better than your Ford kind of thing. But the key thing, if you go back to what Brian said, and this is kind of at the heart of what Halsey was talking about on pricing, as distributors, we're really, really good storytellers. We tell stories, and you start to hold the salesperson accountable, and they go, well, you don't understand, my territory's different. I have a fiercely competitive business. Or you have a bunch of branch managers, and they say, oh, my market's different. I have to have my own I want my own dead inventory. Leave me alone, all right? But the thing that's a transition, and this is a really big piece, is this transition to data and starting to have data and replacing storytelling. You still have to listen to the stories because it's an emotional experience. We're still analog beings in a digital world, but you have to bring data into the business.
The last company that I worked for prior to Annixter, Over the course of just under 7 years, we acquired 7 of our competitors in the United States. And I tell this story to our teams internally all the time, because at the point that we were narrowing in on the close date in every one of those deals, our sales force had convinced us that they were the lowest margin, they sell at cost all the time, and they use more colorful language to describe, what they did.
This audience is familiar with that.
Yeah, and the reality was, once we got into diligence and we saw the real information, every one of the 7 had higher gross margins than we did. Every one. And yet our sales force believed that they were the low margin sellers in the marketplace. They were all entrepreneurial businesses, as many businesses in this industry are, and entrepreneurs like to make money. And so it's the easiest excuse for salespeople. It's also the easy excuse for customers, and we fall into the trap all the time of believing that the other guy is selling at a lower margin, because the tougher alternative to that is to look introspectively and realize we either got outsold or we didn't articulate our value proposition, or something else happened. And so I'm a big fan. We're big fans of strategic pricing, just to drive consistency. You still want influence at the sales level, but it's tough. Salespeople, especially in this industry, have a lot of products to think about. They have a lot of transactions. If you think of the number of SKUs times the number of transactions, no one can keep all those numbers in their head. And so they're likely to make a mistake, and so what do? They price it at 15% or 20% or 25%. They all could be the wrong number, but if they priced it at 15, maybe 17 was the right number. If they priced it at 20, maybe 22. Strategic pricing helps you deal with that issue, but at the end of the day, it's such an easy excuse. I think, the approach is very simply to say, look, price is not a reason to lose a deal. Let's be more creative than that.
Well, and I got one last thing on this whole process piece. You need to put these tools in, but as an example, you'd put in a metric for pricing realization, right? Take all your salespeople, which person can follow the pricing the best, and you take the guy or gal that's the worst and say, if I work with you, do you think you could ever get to be as good as average? It's just, data is an integral part of this whole thing in terms of making it work, but please do not look at the chaos that you live with the customer intimacy strategy and make it rigid, because as soon as you make it rigid, the dumbest guy in the market's going to control pricing, and you take all that value away. There are 2 companies in this room, going back to what Halsey said, in terms of getting close to customers, that actually have iPhone apps that a contractor can have and see the truck, the delivery truck with the electrical. And by the way, in Google, there's no, you're working in a new site, there's no address yet, and they can actually do like a longitude, latitude, and so the contractor working on the building can actually see the truck from the electrical distributor where it is. I mean, and I know for one of those, they had a couple kids put it together. I mean, to me, every time I get an airplane down, look in the cockpit, they're all kids flying it now, so maybe my definition's different.